wanted to give credit where credit is due on the front of domestic companies. I think the Chinese domestic brands, they make good products, they make great products, and they build really, really good companies now. So I wanted to maybe ask if your thoughts about how those Chinese companies approach their marketing from what you've seen, and how do their strategies compare? How are they similar, and then how are they different maybe from international brands?
Now, and this is a really interesting point about what Chinese domestic companies look like in China and what they look like outside, and like what international companies look like in China and what they look like outside. Okay, and it's just fascinating. Those of us who who are interested in this, it's just amazing how you see the differences. So, just like slightly tangential, but picking up on that point, about the iPhone being launched, when you live in Shanghai, right? I would go to a meeting. And on that table, everyone puts their phone, right? It's normal if you put a phone. Now, if I, extrapolated my observation, of what I see in meetings, I would assume Apple had a 97% market share of mobile phones in China, right? But as soon as you get out of those meeting rooms and boardrooms in China, you suddenly see, wow, there are a lot of brands here, and there are a lot of brands who are much, much, much bigger, and you suddenly get out, and I've had the pleasure of working with Huawei and Honor for many years, just fantastic brands with fantastic products, exactly you say. I mean, the product, it's I've got an Honor camera, a phone. You see, I call it a camera, because actually I don't use it as a phone. I use it as a camera because it's 450 megapixel. It's just insane how, the technology that they can put on this and the retail price they put against that, right?
Yeah.
So, what those companies have done, which I think has been outstanding, is really understand what customer needs are. Now, those people in Shanghai buy an iPhone. They buy an iPhone for for reasons beyond, is this the best phone at this price point with the best functionality and everything else? Of course not. But what am I trying to project about myself, about my urbaneness, about my, about my internationalness, about how, wouldn't have a local phone, right? And that's, and I'm not saying that's the case still now, but certainly as it developed, that's what it was. Then you look at, how, Honor or Huawei, whatever, how they built, the technology, the specs, the cameras, and why? Because what did people who were buying phones, who upgrade their phone every year, what did they want to do? They wanted to take pictures. How did they take pictures? They take selfies. So why is your front camera on your iPhone so rubbish? It comes up. No, here I've got this with built-in filters, with built-in everything. I look beautiful. I look like an anime character. I look like that. This is that. Suddenly you're going right. Well, the explosion of self-expression and putting things on the internet. They've built a product, at a price point that all of these people can afford, and yet it does exactly what it needs to. Because people don't need great phone reception. They don't need any of that. They need to take really good photos and be able to upload them so people can just see how awesome they look on their social media.
Yeah.
That's the important thing. And suddenly that became that's their play, right? So, and as soon as you get out of Shanghai, it's funny, even the advertising, the brands, the malls, the shops in the malls, right? They change, and you're not even out of Shanghai. You're just going into a couple of the outer suburbs. Suddenly you're going and look, I've worked with auto companies for 25 years. I figure I know everything about cars, right? I know everything about I would you drive for 20 minutes out of Shanghai city centre, and I'm going, I don't even know what that car is. I don't know what that car is. There's billboards, and I'm going what is that brand? And you're looking it up, going, I have no idea what this is, right? And I know everything, I think. That's why you're never an expert, right? But because there's always something new, there's always something that's there. And there's going, right, well, how do they thrive here? Because price point, functionality, what are they looking for out of a car or a mobile phone or it could be anything, this is so to me, those are the things that are real sort of learnings about how they market. I mean, you look at something going back to the sportswear sector. So, you've got Nike, this is what their position in and whatever else, and it's fine, almost unassailable as that partition. But you look at Anta now, Li Ning, who started off as very, very low tier brands, like, discount, like, going, they're not anymore. And why? Because some of their marketing communications, are not just focused on that bargain basement. Like, we are everywhere at every price point, and like, we are cheap, cheap, cheap. And like, it's not, now you look at their stores, look at their flagships, like look at the experience in store. Like, they're building brands like to sit alongside Nike where people feel comfortable saying like, you know what, the quality, the design, the feel and the ambience when you get into a store, it's not like, I'm picking shoes out of a bucket and like, and that's what you are. The experience has changed. And like the marketing's changed. That's not to say they're still not accessible in all of those like third, fourth, fifth tier like malls. They still have hundreds of thousands of shop fronts, right? And like, and like both online and offline. This is like, this is part of like, what they do. But their communications across all of those are different. Now, some Western brands have like, and international brands have done that well. Some have struggled. I mean, you look at someone like Adidas, right? And who, to my mind, have massively devalued their brand in China just because of their accessibility everywhere. If you're selling on Pinduoduo, if you're selling on discount retailers, it's like, man, like, and at the same time, like not anymore, but, you used to be like, here's your core product, here's Yeezy, he's like, it's like these are, it was a conflict within the brand, right? In terms of like, selling and retail and making sure that tracker is like ticking over, right? Every minute of every day. And it's like, but we're still this brand. It's like, high performance, high design, celebrity endorsed brand. It's like, and that's a struggle for a lot of brands, and sometimes you get lost in that. And I think, and sometimes you look at the market shares, you can see who wins and lose. And then you have a curveball about, where your products are manufactured. You have a curveball around, Xinjiang as they did. Like, I'm right, very hard to recover from this, right? And this is, So these are, and these are things that have to play in mind because, that affects international companies working in China very differently to like, to like to local and domestic competitors because they don't suffer from that, and you can't underestimate like, the level of nationalism as well, I think in China and the pride in Chinese product, which I think has really been elevated over the last sort of like decade or so. And with good reason. The products are good. There's a reason, like, this is the center of the universe for, high speed transport. You look at like the train networks, you look at the infrastructure that's been built around that. I mean, it's just phenomenal what they've done. Like, and that is technology based transportation, bringing like, bringing accessibility to like, a nation. You look at like, EV. I mean, this is the world center of like, electronic and like new energy vehicles, right? There is nowhere like this. So to me, those are the things that's happening. You look, you've seen the numbers in terms of Tesla production in like, in China. It's just incredible, and the turnaround as well, like, from a point where everyone was laughing about that, they're supplying the world now, so that technology exists there. And like, the ability to be able to deliver that exists. Now, not everyone will be able to do that. Not everyone has like the strings and the connections and whatever else is a Western brand to be able to do that. But it's possible, and like, and with the right people guiding you and the right information and the right strategy to start with, it is definitely possible. And there is a market there because there are still consumers who do want to try things. I know it's a massive cliche, but people are interested in trying new things. There is like, it is a market with, zero loyalties, like, in my experience, like, and that's across every product. People are willing to try new things. People are interested to experience. And that's true in like, and that's why, when we look at, technology developments, that's why people have to rush into it because it's about relevance. How do I stay relevant in this? If I'm already playing in this space, my goodness, I could become irrelevant very, very quickly. People stop talking about me. If people stop talking about you in China, wow, that's like, that's it. You're gone, right?
That's it. Yeah.
You don't exist anymore.
What about price point? Because I think about, okay, for example, on this side of the ocean in North America, for me now, because I am more comfortable having spent a lot of time in China, I only buy TCL and Hisense because for me, that technology is near equal to Samsung, and I am paying 70% of the price point. So why would I not do that? And
Yep.
I don't know that, and maybe that's kind of market entry and that's brand evangelism at play with those price points, because they kind of have to. They cannot simply price themselves at the same price as Samsung. They wouldn't sell anything. Everyone would buy Samsung. But I know inherently there's way more value for me going that route, because I know the technology is already there and equalized.
Yeah.
It just is the brand that's holding it back, and I don't care what it says on the front of my TV in my own home or in my own office. In reverse, would a North American, would a Western brand need to want to make that kind of same decision going into China or Asia, anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different question now than it was probably about 15 years ago, just because of what's happened, I think. I mean, this is it's sort of fascinating, just the turnaround in the perception of brands. I think, everything was on its head in China anyway, because like with the new money that came in, exactly, as we were discussing earlier, whether it was whatever product category you looked at, in Western markets, the thing that would sell most would be the entry level product. Yeah, it's like the cheapest thing to get you into that product. Here's whether that was Chanel or whether that was Land Rover. It's like, oh, that was the entry level. And in China, it was always flipped on its head. It was like, what's the thing that sells most? The most expensive thing. Why? Because, why would you, if you've got the money, why would you buy the cheapest thing as an entry? Your entry is the most, you buy the best thing. What's the most expensive one you got? Great. And that's, I mean, I used to go to car, the auto shows all the time, right? And the amount of times you've seen people just walk up going, right, I want this car. And, I can't remember, it was store that. It might have been a Volvo one actually. And it was like, and the guy came and going, I want to buy this car. And going, it's not a real car, it's a concept car. It's like, going like, haha, you're here to negotiate. Go, no, I'm not here to negotiate. It's not actually a car. There's no engine in it. It's like literally made of fiberglass. It's like going, I see your game. And and
sunglasses on. Yeah, I play poker. Okay.
Oh yeah, I know how to play you. Yeah, going, I'm not leaving until I have this car. So it's like, it's not a car.
It's the only one we have.
So, but that is, and that's just an anecdote, which I hope highlights just how this thing is run. But that was true in normal consumption as well. So that, so the advantage Western brands had going in, established, because you're paying for the heritage, you're paying for the name, you're paying for the history of that. And that's why if you look at the marketing, when we were talking about provenance, we were talking about history, talking about the founders of this company, and Coco Chanel stitching every stitch of this, and and that that precision of how things were. That's what you're paying for. Yeah, you're paying for 200 years of development. You're not paying for that product now. And that's what people bought, right? German technology in cars. I'm buying the history of BMW. I'm not buying just this motor vehicle that's going to take me from A to B, right? So they always hit a premium. Now, what's happened in intervening years? Obviously, there has been a surge in the quality of products that China has produced. Yeah? So, and people, while maybe some people still have preferences to our brands, people don't see a distinction. And brands like Huawei have been massive in driving that, because you don't see a distinction in going, right, this is worse quality than this, and when you got every head to head, and the reviews, and whether they're in the US and going back before the troubles, but you look at reviews, head to head reviews, going there's no competition here. The amount, the price point, the technology, the capability, the processing, everything that's in there, the camera, it's this is infinitely better than this. Right. And so I think people have got used to that actually you don't have to pay over the odds, because I'm not buying a brand history anymore. I'm buying some level of exclusivity. And I think that's a different podcast about, brands and and how little exclusivity is now in some of these heritage brands. But we can go down a rabbit hole on that as well. But this is, to me, that is, that's been a fundamental shift. So like coming in, like, with your heritage, with your whatever else, it's like, why are you coming in now with that story? What is your relevance today to customers of today? Yeah. That, there has to be a reason why, you are only coming in. If it's a new product in a new service in a new category, like going, right, this is why it's important. This is why you would use this product, this service. Yeah. This is how it fits into your life. Like, because we understand you, because it's still, and this is China or anywhere else across Asia, we haven't even got into how nuanced like every other market is, relative, relative to China, and how different your approach has to be in every one of those markets. But it holds true. The one thing that's consistent across every single market is you have to be relevant to that market. You have to be relevant to the customers in that market. So you can have a leading global vision and a global product, but what is the localization of that look like? So you look at the Western brands that have left. I mean, you go back, even pre-COVID, the amount of Western brands that withdrew from China, and by withdrew, I mean sold up to their JV. Yeah. So you see the same brand names, but those aren't run KFC, McDonald's. I mean, McDonald's isn't McDonald's, right? I mean, it's like it still has a name there. But that is a local business, for local people, for a local taste, for a local market, with regional variations in China, whatever. That is, it bears the same name, it bears the same logo, but it's not the same business. It's a different business. And a lot of them, because either you lose control in the business you have because it gets so big and whatever else, or you just go well, I can't make this work, or the decision making is so localized anyway. If you want to compete with that there, then you sell out and you go, right,
Disneyland,
take the money back, and and you go and you leave it. And that was true whether you were an Uber or whether you're a McDonald's, right?
Yeah,
you go I can't compete with this, which you need incredibly deep pockets, and you need the connections, the infrastructure. You need to do business in a way that the business is done there. Now, that doesn't preclude other brands from coming in. I mean, and there's still a load of hugely successful, foreign brands in China. It's still possible, and it's still possible for new entrants. But increasingly now, you have to be very clear about what what it is that you're going to deliver, and that price point thing. It's like going, well, if it's something that's already delivering that in China at a competitive price point, then why are people going to pay more for you? I don't think there's, the massive cost consciousness. People will pay for something if they see there's a value in it. There's still huge, oversupply of premium and luxury products in China because people do pay for it because they see some value in paying extra for that in these categories. So what is your industry? What is your category? What is your competition look like? What is your space to play in there? To me, those are fundamental questions which if you can't answer effectively, you're not going to succeed.
Yeah. There's even a lot more to unpack there. I just don't think that Western brands as a mission, as a goal, should be trying to say you want to be number one in China in any category. I think that that's a problem. You're never going to be the incumbent. There's a lot of room though. So, you're shooting
Absolutely.
for third. Yeah, we might be able to help maybe make that happen. But I can tell you there's a lot of headwinds at play that are going to ultimately prevent you, a la Uber, from being number one when you're not local. I just don't think that the entire sphere of everything in that country is set up or going to allow that to happen. And we've seen it multiple times. So
exactly. But interestingly, the converse is true, right? We did, one of the really amazing things that I think we did was try and take Huawei to a global audience. Now, Huawei, their market position in China, going back, 5-6 years, they were completely dominant, 50-60% market share. Of handsets. It was this is amazing. And there is no one who wouldn't take a meeting with Huawei. There's no one who wouldn't you could walk into a room going, I'm representing Huawei, and everyone would go have this, have more, because that is the market position you have. Then you go to other markets and the clients will be like, God, it's really difficult to get this done, I'm going you're 1% market share in this market. You know what I mean? Doors don't automatically open for you. So in the same way that, you're doing this way, Western brands coming in, if you're a Chinese brand going there, you're going well, what route do you take? some of them take the route which is like, I am like Huawei, I need to do this, like, okay, well, you can't always do that. Because like, you need to like work in a different way. Like, your position is different. You're like, and what your objective should be is different. You can't be, exactly to your point. You can't expect to be number one somewhere where like, the infrastructure is basically set up like, against you, in terms of how retail works, in terms of how like, networks work, and like all of this stuff. All of these stuff has to be navigated, so that is most definitely like, how I've seen the flip side. Then you've got other, Chinese brands, and it's interesting you mentioned like, some of those like, those technology ones. But, I was talking to a manufacturer of air conditioning units in Guangzhou, right? And they were telling me that they spend over $200 million a year on Amazon advertising in the US. It's like totally unbranded, just they're selling air conditioning units. They sell like millions of them. But this is, but those are those brands that someone is actually, so they get in under radar because where people don't have a necessarily brand preference, like something like that, it's like, it functions there. They've sold millions of them. Like, there are reviews on the site. Like, they buy it. They don't care if it's from China or not. Like, most of these things are, right? So
give me the BTUs. That's all I care about. Yeah.
And that is, so it's quite interesting that can happen. And those aren't necessarily brands being built, but they're incredible businesses. Right?
Yes.
So anyway, so it's, it's just interesting how these things play out. And like, and again, like, it's, to me, I always keep that in mind that like, you can be a brand business, which is focused on this, or you can just be a great business and like, just focus on, I've got a product here and there are routes to market where, I become like a white label product or service and it just gets veiled under this banner. And like, there's a delivery system that helps me do it. And this is how I make a great business. Who knows? Yeah. I mean, the world's, there's a lot more interpretations of what successful business looks like now, I think, than we used to have in the past.
Yeah. I think maybe human ego plays into the fact that we built something so great. We would love for everybody to know our brand, right? And be able to walk in and say, I'm this company, and then have everything offered to us. That would be nice. But essentially just building a great business and not necessarily having to be a brand on the tip of everybody's tongue. It's not important.
And I think that's a really interesting. Sorry, I know I'm like going on now.
Go ahead.
That's a really interesting point because it comes down to that point about ego and like having your name and like and I've worked with entrepreneurs who wanted to have their face on the billboards, right? I want to be that, and we've all worked with people like that, and that's fine. It's like I love it, like I love the passion, love the energy, love like how personal it is. But
I'm really funny. Let me tell a few jokes.
Great. I want to be in all the ads. Great. Yeah, like I loved it so much I bought the company, right? I mean, there's loads of it. But what I found interesting is that in China there was so much of a lack of ego about that. People like made money. When I talk about those guys who are coming in, like buying Land Rovers, those guys, like, would you have heard the company that he's built, how he made his money? On like ring pulls or the things that go on the end of shoelaces. I've totally forgotten what that word is now. Yeah. But like, there's a guy who does that, right? There's a guy who just does the buttons and the lifts. There's a guy who does like the maintenance and like that's not a household name, but that guy's a billionaire, right? And these guys are like, there is no ego about that because they're, what they want to do is build a business, like, not a brand. They build a business. They make money. Like, their family's happy. Everyone's happy. Like, you can buy whatever he wants, go wherever he wants. That's it. That was the objective. Like, he doesn't need to be known. You see far more of that, I think, in China. And some of that is cultural as well, I think, where, you don't want to be like, the tallest blade of grass, right? You don't want to open yourself up to that exposure. But, because the people who do, like, it doesn't always end well. But, these people, they can make a very, very good living and an incredibly successful business. And you will never, ever hear that brand name mentioned. Might not even have one. Probably doesn't even have a logo, Why does it need one? Yeah.
I mean, the only people who would know it would be the ones that work there. And it's really just whatever the holding company name is on the check, that pays them. That's just, I work for 123XV Inc. Just a number company, holding company. Yeah. Okay. you mentioned this, we talked about this, other regions around APAC. Okay. So I do want to dive into that. Your time with Wavemaker, you were focused on broader APAC, and I want to ask you more about some of the regional stuff there. So you were based in Shanghai, but you were broadly across APAC. I want to know how you manage the markets outside of APAC, outside of PRC. I want to managing the APAC markets out of PRC, but also I'm trying not to overload this question so that you can answer as much. But what was that like? What was it like during COVID? Because you can't then really travel easily, right? So how did that work? And then how did your approach adapt to multiple markets throughout APAC over the years?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and it goes to the fundamentals of what how you see leadership, and I think for me that was even when I took a role of CEO Asia Pacific, it's like, well, what does that mean? Because I've always been a very hands-on person, right? I've built from the ground up, and I think what made me stronger in management roles was that I've done nearly every one of these jobs. I can really empathize with every one of these people about your frustrations about what works, what doesn't work, and I can understand if you tell me this. So again, okay, well, I get what this. Let me try and help you with my experience, and that is, that was, when I was running a company of 120 people, and I tried to take that through to running a company of 3,000 people. It becomes more difficult as things expand, but it's still, your way, because you still think that is what leadership looks like. I was never like a ceremonial, ambassadorial, CEO sweeping, show me a presentation, everyone claps, let's go for a dinner, I'll pay. It's like, which I think a lot of those roles were in many organizations, right? Here's my market visit, all right, Taiwan's off the list, tick, won't be there again for 4 years. I don't have to think about it. So it's that wasn't me. It was like, going, right, how do I get into markets? How do I, leave, a legacy of understanding that makes them more self-sufficient, makes them understand what, a company vision looks like, makes them understand how important culture is to actually developing that business. Because to me, that's, in a services industry, if you don't have a culture, if you don't make that organic, it's really, really difficult to to grow your business. And certainly, I don't want to work in somewhere where there isn't a good organic culture, where people don't feel they can come and be themselves and be and contribute to a business. So to me, that's really important. And I really enjoyed getting into those markets. And I never used to let people sit me in a room. They'd always give you an office or something, go, there you go, enclose you, and then they'd feed you these templated presentations, and wheel someone in. They have a script and go oh no, I'm going to sit in the middle of it. I'm going to find a desk and I'm going to sit there and because for me, the observation, the understanding, listening to people talk, hearing what isn't said as much as anything else, that's the thing that leads you to what a culture really looks like, and what works, what doesn't work. And to me, that was, that's how I ran the business. Then for 2020, I mean, oh my goodness, it's it's a whole reevaluation of everything, right? I mean, I had my travel plan for the first 3 months of 2020, because it obviously hit in Asia a little bit earlier, and certainly in China a little bit earlier than it hit the rest of us. I was due in Pakistan, Philippines, Thailand, I was organizing. I was like, this is, that was my quarter planned out. It was suddenly it's no, nothing. And and this might be the case for a really long time. I mean, we didn't know, right? I mean, how long this could be. This could be 3 months. It could be as it turned out, 3.5 years. But it's so you have to have a total reassessment of what is the value that you bring. How do you do this? And how do you manage markets? Because while you can make yourself accessible to market leaders and, your leadership teams maybe in each market, that doesn't give you a full picture. And that didn't, and for me, that doesn't give you, because it's a very controlled environment on Zoom or a Teams call, right? People tell you what they want to tell you. really hard to dig in, like, beyond that. And some of that you only get through observation and physical presence. So I think what has sort of happened, like, and this is like my personal approach to it, is you end up becoming very, very accessible to everybody. Everyone's in lockdown, but like, you make yourself like, right, anybody, anywhere in the company, like, in every town hall, in every communication, you can contact me. Here's my WhatsApp. Here's my WeChat. Here's my, here's like, anything that troubles you, anything, like, I want to hear from you. Now that, was brilliant, because lots of people took me up on it, but also it becomes like totally overwhelming because lots of people took me up on it, right? So that's what you end up doing, just talking to them. But it gives you a better idea about, like, the business, and it feeds into your strategy for a business. It gives you pointers, and, like, much quicker than data points can in terms of business performance, as to what's working, what isn't working. Because if you see a current, like a sort of like a theme developing in individual markets, lots of people talking about the same thing, that's much quicker feedback than, like, saying, all right, especially in agency world, your data points lag at such a rate, like, 3 months, 6 months, like 12 months, you might start losing people after 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, right? Then, like, you see unhappiness in clients, then you start losing clients, but that won't happen. Like, some of your contracts might be 12 months, 24 months. The impact of, like, what's been happening, and, like, going, you can't reverse 24 months of, like, of mismanagement, and so that's, to me, that's how, I dealt with it. And I think, it's, it was just really important to stay connected in that way. And I think that's really, what changed a lot. Now, I think that it also, what hasn't changed through that time is really understanding, the differences, like, between the differences across Asia Pacific. Okay. Now, as a region, it's different to, like, North America and Europe, like, but, as individual markets, it's just, I mean, unless you have spent time here, you have worked here, you have, like, been, like, and been in the thick of it, you cannot underestimate how diverse a region Asia Pacific is, from India to Australia to China to Japan to Thailand, like, culturally, politically, religiously, geographically, like, socially, economically, everything is just so different. I mean, it's, so, the amount of times I would get something like, it's like, Gordon, how's this going to land in Asia? And I can go, what, in all of it? I mean, like, well, which part? I mean, like, there is no homogenous, like, Asia, everything is so different, so nuanced. And I think, to me, that was like, that is, the biggest thing, like, when you talk to, like, Western organizations, but, like, even people in Europe going, oh, Europe's really diverse. Europe's not diverse. Europe's not diverse at all. Like, relative to somewhere like Asia, it's not. You can't compare, right? It's different markets, technically, different countries, but the diversity just simply isn't there, like, and then, that's before you even dive into individual countries. Now, that creates problems, I think, for a lot of marketers, because a lot of marketers, in the Western world, like, they want things to be consistent. They want them to be, like, repeatable, reusable, and, like, templated. Yeah. Kind of like, no. But surely this would work here. No, I mean, there are still companies probably producing stuff on Google Stacks, send them to China and going, here you go, I've built you this. You're going, like, fantastic. That's like, you do know about this, right? It's not been a secret, like, for the last 20 years, right? But it still happens, right? Because people are so, like, this is how it works. This is what works here. And things tend to be built, particularly for Western countries, with that, a very clear focus on, like, North America and Western Europe. Yeah. Because because the people who sit and design these things, they sit on the West Coast or the East Coast, or they sit in London, right? That's it. That's, like, and those are their points of reference.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But, the decisions that are then made, and, like, why some companies are successful here and why some aren't, it's so obviously and dramatically clear, is because you actually have an understanding of how to make this work here. You have an understanding of nuance. You can have a global vision. You can have a global idea. You can have a global product. But how that manifests in terms of, what that product even looks like, where it's distributed, how it's bought, how it's communicated in individual markets, completely different. I mean, the example I gave about Thailand, like, going, like, yeah, great, you can have an e-commerce business, but I don't see how that's going to help your 99% like bricks and mortar business, right? This is, it's Whereas in China, going like, well, all you need is e-commerce. Like, you don't need, like, you can have a D2C business and you build it there as long as you've got a logistics set up. Like, you don't need to go to it. Like, you don't need a retailer, right? It's just totally unnecessary because people live in the virtual digital world anyway. So, you can build a brand straight from there, like, D2C, done, like, So it's a completely different play, but
Totally.
What I would, but what I would really sort of like stress out of that is that, you just need to like understand that going into everything. Like, what is your size of opportunity? Where is your growth going to come from? Where is like audience like fit? Where does your product fit into that? Because some of the probably, let's say, less mature markets digitally, they also hold a massive amount of opportunity. I mean, part of the reason I moved to Southeast Asia is like, if most of the big brands I was talking to and a lot of the, smaller, startup brands I was talking to, the opportunity is actually in Southeast Asia and like, and probably India as well. One, that's demographic. And I know, like, before we started, we talked a little bit about the challenging demographics, particularly in like in North Asia. These are aging populations, which are, as you say, paying back, not paying forward. And it's like, and it is going to be a challenge in terms of doing business. Again, not impossible because the numbers are still there and it's still like, it's not, the end of the world. But if you look at, the population booms, Indonesia, Thailand, India, Vietnam, like, and you marry that to the mass digitization that we're seeing in those markets. And, and I compare it very, like, very clearly to what I saw in China, 15, 20 years ago, that move from like rural to urban. That ability, suddenly everyone's got a smartphone. Suddenly everyone's accessible. Suddenly everyone can communicate, can create content. And like, and they've already leaped into this sort of like social commerce world. Their first interactions with like digital and social commerce. Our first interactions, I mean, like, press that modem and like, go, and like, or put the telephone on the thing, right? Exactly, right? This was our introduction. We've gone through every phase since. Most people aren't. Most people are like going, their first experience is 5G. I mean, come on, like, this is like, it's a completely different world, but it opens up opportunities. If you talk to like major, like, consumer brands, like, globally, where's your next 100 million customers going to come from? Like North America, Western Europe? Probably not even China, right? But they will come from like Southeast Asia. They will come from India, because that's the population shift now. You have a young, mobile, very, ambitious audience and population who want to achieve stuff. Like the things I love going to like, Vietnam, going to Thailand, like even Cambodia, you can see there's an energy to like to get there. It really reminds me of China, like, when I first got to China, that they're at this stage of development, that there is, they want to get somewhere fast, and like, you look at, the templates that they have building manufacturing, whether it's in Malaysia or whether it's in Vietnam, you look at the manufacturing that they're building there. It's incredible. You look at like, I mean, I've always been massively impressed by like, like the teams we had in Jakarta and the teams like, that like the digital savviness, the ability to build and like construct like, really complex, like, digital platforms, it's all there and it's being built like, by people in that market. There's a reason that these will become hubs. And I think, so to me, that's the excitement. I think like Singapore is like, is becoming much more of that, the Asia hub now. I think, like there has been a mass migration. I mean, I can't walk the streets without seeing someone I know from Shanghai or Beijing or Hong Kong. There has been a mass migration of decision makers here and of like big brands and of like, and of that technology and startup, because they are going to drive the next like major growth in, for brands. And it will come in this region, I think. So that's a bit sort of like headliney, I think, but you really sort of like see, that it, while the opportunity is there, you still need to drill down into each of these things. You still need to like have that relevance. You still need to talk to the right people who can actually, who can give you that solution, which isn't cookie cutter. Because cookie cutter, like even in those emerging markets, you can still spend a lot of money very quickly and get nowhere. Because if you don't have everything lined up in terms of your brand, your position, your product, your relevance, your like communications, your infrastructure, your route to market, all of these things have to be lined up. And it's like, you can make, mistakes very, very quickly and lose a lot of money very quickly, I think. But it's, the opportunity is just so immense. And, and I think, the energy I feel, particularly after having spent, a Christmas with the strikes in the UK. It's like, when nothing worked, nothing happened. And you sort of go, wow, here, everyone's like really keen to make things work, and it's a very, very different energy, and again, it's something that really needs to be experienced, I think, because people will invest when you get there, when you see what hurry people are in to make an impact and
right.
And make business work.
Okay. Yeah. And here you had mentioned about why you moved to Singapore, and here I thought it was for the humidity. I want to, which nobody ever was. And I'm very disappointed, Gordon. I've been expecting a whole bunch of like drops of bollocks. It's one of my favorite words to hear people say. I really haven't heard it. I'm just saying, I'm kind of disappointed. I may actually just have to make the title now, everything's the same across APAC, bollocks. And there I get it.
Well, I used to have this T-shirt which I got printed, I don't know how, which is just like, because I was so tired of saying it all the time. So I got a T-shirt going, it's different in China, because you just end up, someone would tell you something, you just go, this is a fantastic idea, but can I just say it's different in China?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I know. So speaking of different across Asia, I'm going to move to the speed round. This is the money round, the whatever it is. Yeah. So I'm going to throw at you some of the countries, and I want you to just, first thing that comes to your mind, something about, trend that you're seeing or what you expect to see in the next 5 years or so, kind of like 60 seconds or less type of thing. And we'll start with your former home, Greater China.
Okay. I mean, all of these, the future is really difficult, but China particularly, it's like going, everyone's saying that they're out and China's back. China never went away. China is the new China. Everything, we hear all of this and I hope so, because it's a fantastic place to work and there's so much innovation, so much. Now, the handbrake I would pull on that is, still have a major problem in logistical problem around semiconductors, which I think is going to stifle a lot of innovation. I think this is a big thing that is, if I look at the leaps in metaverse, if I look at how they are developing their AI and everything else, it might be a problem. Just in terms of their let's say their insularness and their inward looking, which has been partially forced on them, but that is to me a big watch out. I think it's the appetite therefore for investment into that market. I think is you have to be really sure.
Okay.
And you have to, and I think so to me the big trend there. I think there will be more development. I think the metaverse is something which is just exploding in its own way here. And I think that's something to look out for. Okay, but that to me is the big lookout, because that might point the direction to a lot of ways that it builds into the rest of Asia Pacific. And I think to me that's always a really interesting thing. Whether other countries like it or not, you look at how if I look at how commerce is developed across the rest of Asia, this is built on a China model. This is how commerce is entertainment. Yeah, retail is entertainment, shopping is entertainment. Both in the physical space and the digital space. This is a Chinese phenomenon, which is just taking over everywhere. And I think and even you see it even in the West, right? And this is this is why those platforms can develop, and this is why it's become what it has, and become a global phenomenon, not just a China one. I think some of the technological developments we're seeing there is going to be really interesting. And I think the other part, new energy for me. I mean, this is this is the home, and we'll see great strides in that. I think it will become so prevalent in everyday life, just in terms of new energy vehicles, autonomous driving. I'm just it's really, really exciting, I think, what's happening there, because they have the whole infrastructural support to make that happen, which is unlike probably some of the restrictions that people have in other markets. That was more than 60 seconds, sorry. The others would be quicker.
Japan.
No, it's great that it's opening up. I think this offers new opportunities. I think Japan is a market that really suffered from being closed off. Yeah. So I think one, you're seeing tourism come back. It's a wonderful place to visit. I think the headline inflation costs, everything else, I think are going to make it problematic still for their in terms of growth and in terms of investment. But I think in terms of opening up, and in terms of how the role of tourism to their economy and the role of like, that culture wise, I think is going to be a massive fillip for them this year. I think, I mean, you see the amount of people from China already traveling to like Japan now that it's opened up. It's just, amazing. Yeah. And it's just, and I think they've really missed out on that. And I think that will help, I think, reinvigorate them this year. Definitely.
Okay. Humidity. I mean, Singapore.
Yeah. It's going to be hot. It'll be rainy at the same time. That will keep going forever. Yeah. But look, this is quite. What's interesting is that I think this is very much now the APAC hub of decision making. I think those so many companies that used to be HQ'd in we had grand ambitions that Shanghai was going to become the APAC HQ. I think a lot of companies started that way, and I was very much involved in a lot of that. That's not the case anymore, and even Hong Kong, the migration is here because I think one you see the door to both India and Southeast Asia, and that next 100 million customers for whoever you are. So to me, this is a doorway. This is like gateway. And I think, while you'll see technology hubs spring up in the other, Southeast Asian countries and India particularly, this is still going to be the gateway. It'll be like, this is where people will be able to, pick and choose what's happening across the rest of the region to bring it together in some sort of universal play for Asia Pacific. So really important over the next sort of like 2 to 3 years.
Okay, then let's go to, we're going to come back to the neighbor there, but let's go to Malaysia first.
Malaysia. With all of us expats sort of coming in, like the manufacturing business in Malaysia has just skyrocketed in the last year. No, but manufacturing, I think, is playing a major role in how they're developing and how they want to develop. I see them much more as that hub supplying, the garden of the region. It's going to play a major role, I think, in terms of how they develop their economy. I think there's still challenges. I think, in terms of technology, talent, infrastructure, because I think a lot of companies that we work with try to set up KL as a real hub as well, as an alternative to Singapore. It's just really hard, just in terms of talent, in terms of experience, in terms of it's anything like that is going to be a challenge. And I think that, you use it as a manufacturing outsource, as a hub for that. And I think that, that will be the key role it plays, and, proximity to Singapore as well. I think, will play a big part in that. Bali, quite interesting because the amount of people who've set up in Bali, businesses, like digital, consultancy businesses.
Oh, yeah.
There are so many smart people who just live their life. I mean, it's incredible. It's everywhere you go, it's they are so connected, so and just so smart. And and they're going work-life balance. Welcome to my digital consultancy stroke surf school. I mean, it is, that's the life. I mean, anyway.
I know so many people that live there now. Yeah, 100%. But en masse, Indonesia.
En masse. But then if you go to what I loved about Jakarta, I think that the technology is there, and I think the infrastructure is there. I see that, particularly in our industry, for us, we built, our biggest global addressable content hub is actually in Jakarta. That's where it's built. Because it's so far advanced in terms of being able to build, digital solutions, a young, digitally enabled workforse. All the ambition is massive, I think. And to me, I just love it. I just love the energy going there. Didn't love the traffic, but loved the energy. Loved their ability to actually take really sort of sophisticated digital technology and try and scale that for as global solutions. Wow, I was really impressed. Really impressed. And I think to me that's first place I'd be going. I just think that the infrastructure's there really, and then the population. I mean, it's people forget it's the 4th most populous country in the world, right?
140 million. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, there is everything going for it, at the moment, and to me, it's a really fascinating place. I'd love to spend more time there.
Yeah, I feel bad. I'm going to tie the last two together just almost for time. We're already this is the longest recording we've ever done. I'm so surprised. I've taken 6 drinks of water throughout this. You haven't even touched your cup yet. I'm blown by that.
I'm going.
Yeah. Okay. So Thailand and Vietnam, I've been to both. I don't see how we can even put them together, but those are the last two I wanted to ask about.
And I think, look, Thailand, I think is really interesting because like they've come out of COVID with just like this plan, which, you know, for a country that is as conservative culturally as Thailand, it's just like, whoa, what's happened here? It's like, you know, but they suffered so badly. And like, you know, I know from talking to the teams there, like, you know, over this COVID period, you know, you figure how much of, you know, their direct and indirect GDP is as a result of tourism, and the impact that has had, like, you know, on that economy over the last sort of like 3 or 4 years. So to open up and reposition itself as this, like, you know, as whatever it is, and it's just like, it's, you know, it will, I mean, it's going to be massive for them this year. You know, they'll get back to probably like, you know, pre-COVID numbers maybe next year, I think, in terms of tourism. So I think that to me is like, you know, just their position as what they are, you know, this playground that they've created. I think that's, you know, to me that's their role. And Vietnam is totally different. Vietnam is so much more like, you know, culturally, so much more like China, I think, in terms of, you know, the way it's developed, the way, you know, honestly, the first time I went to Ho Chi Minh, it was like, I was like, this is like going to Shanghai in like, you know, the mid 2000s, because it's, you know, you have like a Chanel, and next to it you have like a little noodle shop, and next to it you have like, you know, and then, you know what I mean? It was like, and that's what it used to be like in Shanghai before everything was just like a mall, right? You know, before everything was luxury mall. They got rid of it, all of that sort of like the character and nuance. That's what Vietnam's like now. And then you look at the manufacturing, you look at like, you know, their capability and their capacity for a country of that size. I mean, I think that's fascinating, and like, you know, and same goes for Cambodia as well, by the way. Like, you know, I think that's, you know, that they will, you know, not that their costs aren't rising, but I really do see that these are things that are, you know, going to drive their economy, drive the investment that goes in, and drive like, you know, the population as well. Okay,
cool. Peru. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Throw that one at you. Hey, let's end on talking about something that I can already tell that you love, because every time you mention it, your eyes light up. Let's talk about the metaverse. I think you really like it. It's a buzzy word. I think people are starting to understand it's someplace they need to be. Still don't even understand it, nor how to be, quote unquote, there. So, tell me a little bit about it. Is it all hype, or is there something really there that people need to pay attention to?
I mean, you know, it's exciting because it's new, and I don't think you can ever underestimate, you know, that when you've worked in Asia, new is relevance. Relevance is currency. And currency is money, right? You know, and I think, you know, if you think about it like that, it's like any platform, any like, you know, any, you know, delivery system of communications, of audiences matching with brands. It's like, you know, this is, you know, you think about it like that. It's the most relevant. It's the most current. It's like, you know, and it has the most potential because, you know, whereas, you know, your plays in more static and traditional, you know, channels, you know, were fairly fixed. You know, you have open reign here to do what you want to do, I think, and that is exciting, and that's why everyone lights up, and that's why everyone wants to talk about it. But it's also scary because, like, you know, you know, this is, you know, there isn't a play. There's not really a playbook even, right?
No.
You know, and so, you know, going back to what we were discussing earlier, you know, what is my role here? You know, what am I trying to achieve by being here, other than I'm a marketer and I definitely need to be in the metaverse, because if I'm not in the metaverse producing NFTs, I am not relevant to anybody, like, you know, because that's all anyone wants to talk about. You know, reality, I mean, while it's massive business, it's still only a fraction of what's happening in, you know, in the rest of the marketing communications world, right? So there's huge potential. Now, the interesting thing for me is, like, you know, as, you know, we were talking about people's forays into or how they've got themselves into digital, you know, therefore their comfort level in that space, you know, becomes, you know, actually imperative to how you as a brand behave in that space to those people, what role your brand has to those people in that space. So the level of comfort that people have in this space, I think, you know, basically dictates where you as a brand and you as a and you as a category, where you get to play, you know, and where you get to do this. Now, we said like a lot of people's first interaction with digital is now 5G, is in a virtual or augmented reality sort of state, or that capability. So they're totally comfortable. And increasingly, what I see, like consumers are really, really excited by and actually much more comfortable not talking to a real person, talking to a chatbot, talking to an AI like simulation, because they feel they actually have much more information that person's going to give you, and much more like clarity about the things that you're trying to find, with much less of a personal filter that comes with it, or a script that comes with it. It's like, to me, that's why, ChatGPT is like just been so like phenomenal, right? Because it's like, right, this becomes, I'm not asking someone who is like basically paid to tell me something. This like gives me information and like, things that I can explore in different areas, take it in different ways, and like, which are completely off script, which are going to be much more personalized to what it is important to me, and give me the experience that I want within this space. Now that to me is like, is so powerful. Yeah. And, if you're in certain categories and like, in certain businesses, it will become a fundamental way that you communicate with people, because that's the expectation that people have, is in how they communicate and how they interact with brands. Now, for others, it's not the case. It's the same way, like, going back to that argument about like, why should I move some of my TV spend to digital? Like, why would I lower my share of voice? Like, I'm trying to reach everybody in the world at the cheapest possible, cost per thousand. Like, you're increasing that by moving it to here with like, effectiveness unknown, right? So, there is still, you will have those conversations, and you still have those conversations. So that to me is, is a conversation that you need to have internally before you start with any with anything you do there. What do I want to achieve in this space?
For this? Is APAC, just real quick, is APAC, if we're going to talk metaverse and we're going to talk about marketing and trying to advertise or to sell, and is APAC leading the way?
I would say yes, in many ways, because there is an openness of consumers. There is an openness of like accessibility, which which I think has been incredibly democratizing, I would say, to like to the development of the internet. Even in something like, even in China, which is like closed off, which is like a difficult place to or can be quite scary like place to do digital. In actual fact, what we have here is like, an openness to new ways of communication, new ideas from consumers, from like, from brands, from companies who are willing to trial, willing to test, and like, and know that they need to do this, because if you're playing catch up on a platform, that platform explodes, you are in serious trouble, because like, in the same way, like, all those people like, going, should we be on like TikTok? Should we be on ByteDance? Is this something that we should be doing? We lose control of the brand. We lose all this. Should we play wait and see? It's the people who embrace it and the people who've like gone with it that have like, that have thrived in that space. This is like an Asian phenomenon that is spread outwards, right? And it will continue to be, because these, you have this combination of infrastructure of open commerce, basically, because you have multiple platforms all playing in different spaces. You have the convergence of entertainment, of like, of information, of ability to purchase. You have like, these people who just live in these worlds anyway, be it in that gaming environment, be it in like, and that's a whole, another area, which is just like so massive to explore about, the potential and the opportunities. But these people, this is where they exist already, so you can try, and I think there is opportunity to like, to test this, because, a lot of like international global brands are going to struggle with this, but your brand doesn't have to be the same thing everywhere, right? And eventually it's not, right? If you are truly like successful in every market, you're not the same proposition everywhere, right? You can't be, because like, the tastes are different, that is, that is just like human characteristics, culture, like, like literally your taste is different in different places. And that is genetic, not just like, not just driven by, your experiences. So to me, these are things that like, provide a testing ground for brands now, I think in Asia Pacific, because people are open to that. You know, you look at the population, you look at the infrastructure, you look at the technology, you look at, you know, this like movement from like, you know, not being a consumer into being a consumer. You know, the whole world's open. Like, you know, you can recreate your brand. And that's the beauty, I think, about Asia. You can have a brand that's 200 years old sitting in like, you know, Kansas City. And like, you'd say, right, that, but you can reinvent yourself and be a completely different brand to different consumers at a different stage of their, like, you know, maturity and development about brands. And you can do that in Asia because they've got no history. They don't like, and the vast majority of them don't really care about that anymore. You know, we talked about provenance and all the rest of it before. I don't see that anymore. Oh, we are a German brand. No, no one wants to know that anymore. It's not important. You know, not for these, not for product categories now. Now, what's important is like, what are you doing for me? Why is this relevant to me? How does it sit in this space? How are you communicating with me? How does that integrate into what is important to me? And what's important to me? Chatting with my friends online, like, you know, gaming in these areas, like, you know, playing this, doing that, like, you know, and building out this world where I can actually express myself in a very different way to how I've been allowed to in my real life.
Yeah.
It's like the potential is awesome. And I think, you know, and, you know, I've obviously, you know, I would say that I'm sitting here in Asia, but, you know, that's what drew me to Asia in the first place. You know, that openness and the opportunity for change and creating the new, because you can create the new. You know, you look at the brands that are coming up now. You look at, like, you know, the technology enablers that are allowing that to happen. These are all new brands here. You know, and it's far more open, I think, in this part of the world than it probably is in the more traditional Western world.
Agreed. Okay. Well, very, very well answered. Thank you for that on a difficult topic and a new topic. So it's not an easy thing to unpack because we just don't know what it is yet. We don't know how it's going to turn out. We wouldn't even be able to begin to put together what ROADs might be, or, you know, it's just it's so new, right? And but don't sleep on it as well. It could be awesome.
Exactly.
Have fun with it for now. Okay, awesome. Thanks, man.
This has been brilliant. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, Gordon, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm sure, you know, from me and Eddie and all of our listeners, you know, formally, thank you very much for being on the show today.
Awesome. Loved every minute. Thank you so much.
Okay, for those of you, of course, watching on YouTube, don't forget we have the audio-only version if you need your hands and eyes and ears for, you know, for other things like driving. And you just want the podcast, go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere else that we have the podcast. And for those of you listening on audio, you got to come and see us, especially how Gordon, who, you know, is, you know, between, you know, and he's building his own company now, but he still came up, showed up, wore cufflinks. He's outdressed me like by a billion times. You got to come and see this conversation. It was amazing. So just go to the WPIC YouTube channel. But that's it for us for now. Again, big thanks to Gordon for showing up today. Big thanks for Eddie and everybody for arranging this thing and putting this conversation together. And join us next time. Thanks for showing up, and we'll see you.